So I recently completed the Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, and I have some thoughts. I will be somewhat reserved in this video as to avoid any potential spoilers for people who haven't gotten that far into the DLC. I'll only be discussing the first area and the first two bosses you're likely to encounter, who are both also in promotional material. The DLC is expensive, it's $40, that's more than half the price of base Elden Ring. So the big question is it worth it? And let me put it this way, if FromSoft released this DLC as base Elden Ring and charged $70 for it, no one would complain. There's that much content. I'd even say it's far superior to the majority of AAA shovelware that's been coming out these days, and I have a video about that coming soon, so you should definitely subscribe. All that being said, as you can tell from the thumbnail, I gave the DLC a 7.5 out of 10. Why? Where'd the 2.5 go? Well, similarly to the release version of Elden Ring, the DLC has some performance issues. But even worse than that, there were quite a few instances where my game crashed. And it got so bad that my main DLC save doesn't work anymore because I got stuck in a crash loop every time I loaded it. But luckily, I did multiple playthroughs in preparation for the DLC, so I had a backup, but this was still unideal. Usually if a game is good enough, I would just overlook performance issues and just focus on the game itself. And to a certain extent, I did do that here, which is why I'm not giving this game a 1 out of 10, but it's really difficult to enjoy Elden Ring when you have an inconsistent frame rate. But this performance issue was my main issue with the DLC. Otherwise, it's more or less sorta perfect. In an interview, Miyazaki stated that the DLC would be roughly the size of Limgrave. Even assuming he meant Limgrave and the Weeping Peninsula, this is still severely underselling it. The DLC is closer to Limgrave with the Weeping Peninsula, Caelid with Dragon Barrow, and maybe like half of Liurnia. And even then, that's not properly selling it. The way the DLC is designed, it's far more content dense than base Elden Ring. Even the random caves and side dungeons are far more interesting, and I won't even show you any footage of this because it's far better to go into it blind. The world is designed with quite a bit of verticality. You're gonna find that you're often either gonna be looking up at or looking down at areas, and sometimes you'll have no real idea how to get to them, which can get a little frustrating. But I felt more or less the same way about base Elden Ring. Visually, the world is absolutely stunning, which is to be expected. Elden Ring was already a beautiful game. While not necessarily a graphical powerhouse, the art direction is absolutely amazing. You're often gonna find yourself stopping just to take in the view. I think it's a goddamn crime that the game doesn't have a photo mode. I, like a lot of other players, were probably going into the DLC, few hundred hours in Elden Ring, thinking you're hot shit, just to get completely humbled when a basic enemy takes away like half your health bar. The DLC is hard, frustratingly so at times, but I don't think it's impossible. The DLC offers you a new upgrade system called the Scadu Tree's Blessing, and the upgrade you get from it is quite significant, though you're really not gonna notice it until you get around level 10. That's right around when your attack power and your defense is gonna double. They also offer a way to upgrade Spirit Ashes in case you need to summon. The game really does expect you to find these because without them, the DLC is brutally difficult, and they're bosses that will absolutely kill you in just 2 hits. I will say, I wish there were less of them, but the upgrade you did get from them was a little bit more significant, but that's just my opinion. But even with these blessings, don't expect to steamroll any of these bosses, unless you're really willing to cheese them. So let's talk about those bosses. The 2 first Remembrance bosses that you're gonna encounter are both mandatory and they're no pushovers. The first one you're likely to run into is the Divine Beast Dancing Lion, who I'll just refer to as the Lion. And I think he's a pretty good boss. But he is one of those bosses where you're gonna be fighting the camera as much as him. His boss room is actually deceptively small, and he's a lot bigger than he looks. His moveset isn't impossibly complicated, but he is really aggressive and might be even more mobile than Malekith. Because of this, he's quite often gonna push you into corners where you're gonna be fighting the camera more than you're fighting him. If you are struggling with this guy, I recommend using fire damage because I'm pretty sure he's weak to that. That being said, something about him and something you're gonna notice with a lot of these DLC bosses is if you're someone who didn't like the bosses in base Elden Ring, I don't know that you'll enjoy the bosses in this DLC. The other boss you're likely to encounter is Rellana, and she's an interesting boss. She feels like a combination of Rennala, Loretta, and Melania, which is pretty cool because Queen Rennala is actually her sister, which sorta makes sense, their names sound really similar. This boss is really difficult. She has a lot of health, and her moveset is definitely not the easiest in the game, but it's fairly well telegraphed, and is definitely a boss I would enjoy if I was getting a consistent frame rate. Right around the Castle Ennis area where she's located, I have consistent frame rate issues. This DLC is very CPU intensive, while my GPU is sorta just half asleep. She's definitely a fight I probably would have enjoyed a lot more if my frame rate wasn't all over the place. But looking beyond that, while very difficult, she's definitely a really good boss. But if you are struggling with her and you want a tip, I'd say use lightning damage, cause that's what I kinda did. Overall, the DLC is pretty amazing and is absolutely worth the $40. I think it's really funny that we're halfway through the year and the best game that has come out is a DLC for Elden Ring. And there is a lot more I could say about this DLC, but I'll likely make a full retrospective on Elden Ring when my channel gets a bit larger, so I'll save the majority of my thoughts for then. For now, I'm gonna go start a new playthrough, so peace out.
You know, man, I was left absolutely flabbergasted by that last boss. You know, as someone who's pretty deep into Elden Ring lore, I really was so fucking confused when I saw what it was. It's like, it answers a few questions, but then hints at so many. And even in the base game, there isn't a whole lot to suggest it, and I was just so confused, you know? I was expecting one thing and then just got a whole different thing. You know, like, I don't know, man, like, and I've been reading item descriptions and shit, and I think maybe it's because I wasn't paying attention to the NPCs enough. My mind is just low-key fucking exploding after that final boss. And it was so fucking hard too, dude, I swear to God, man. Jesus Christ, I was just, dude, I'm done, man, I'm done, you know? I can't wait for those fucking lore YouTubers to finally explain that shit to me, because God fucking knows it, dude. I was just so flabbergasted.
Wait, what the fuck? Is this thing still on?